And we're live. Hello, everybody, wherever you are in the world watching this. Today, I'm going to go live and answer one of the questions that I got in my YouTube comments. And every time I get a YouTube comment, I get very excited because I'm very passionate about the videos I make. And when someone's like, hey, tell me about this, tell me about that, I'm like, I'd be more than happy to talk about it. So today's question, and I feel like a lot of new coaches and maybe even existing coaches might be able to relate to this, is how do I convince someone to buy my service? How do I convince them that they need to work with me? And this is very common, right? Because when you're negotiating with someone, when you're on a call with someone, obviously the end result you want out of that is to get them to buy your service, right? So on this live stream, I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to explain how that works. I feel like my mic just dipped out here. Give me just a second to change that up for you. Where did it go? I need to change my camera sometimes. Okay, we got a crappier angle, but we'll work with this, okay? So what I wanted to do today is talk to you about how you can generate this need within your clients. How do you get them to buy your service? How do you get them to realize that they need your service? This is, I want to preface this because this is not you convincing people. Now, when I get this message, like, how do I convince people? There's always like, how do I bring them to my side? What do I say to them that changes their mind, right? Now, I want to break down what traditional sales concepts are and what I've learned and what I do in my calls. I'm not a big believer that it's my job to convince someone. I don't like convincing people that my service is for them, okay? And I'll show you exactly what I mean. Let's do a quick demonstration. So I'll open up my little sketchpad. By the way, isn't this camera super cool? Like, look at this top-down angle I've got. I wish I could see who's commenting. It just says Facebook user on my end. Please let me know what your name is just so I can see. And if you have any questions, let me know as well, because I'd love to answer your specific questions, okay? So again, we'll talk about how to quote-unquote convince someone to buy your service. So I want to start by explaining what the emotional journey looks like for a prospect. So a prospect being your ideal client, right? Where are they in their buying journey? So let's just let's make a ladder, okay? We'll make a little ladder looking thing like that. Hey, Lynn, thank you very much. I'm glad. Isn't it fantastic? Like, I wish I could draw and do something more creative with it, but you know what? I like demonstrating it like this. It's much easier than doing it on the digital things, right? Anyway, so we got a little ladder situation here, okay? Now, the first stage here is going to be your stage 0, which is essentially no interest. They don't know who you are. They have no familiarity with you. They're not aware of you. They've never seen you before. So this could be considered as a cold prospect, right? No interest. So the second step after that is going to be initial interest. So maybe they glance on your profile. They're like, oh, okay, this person helps people with their health, or this person helps people find a job, whatever. Initial interest, and then they will educate themselves, okay? Then they will decide whether this is something they're interested in, and then they'll make up their mind, yes or no. So this is kind of the ladder people go on with your prospects, right? So a lot of people, when they get on a sales call with someone, they expect people to be right here, okay? So they're on the call and they've decided they want to buy something. They're already there, and it's going to be the most piece of cake sales call ever because people have already made their mind they want it. The truth of the matter is, I wish it was that easy because my job would be made redundant. I didn't have to teach someone how to do sales because everyone would just sell these people. The people who are in the market, who've decided they want something right now, this is probably going to be anywhere between 1% to 5% of the total population, right? So you don't want to wait for people to be in this point where they've decided they want to buy and then reach out to you. Because what are you doing? You're missing out on the 95% of the population that doesn't even know if they need it. I'll give you a perfect example, okay? So I used to work for a company, and I'll use orange because the company's logo is orange. The company was called Vivint, and you can look it up. It's a alarms company. So they sell security systems and stuff like that, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar company. I think it's number 2 in the world. If not, I think number 1 is ADT. Number 2 is Vivint. If you look at their revenue, how they make money, anywhere between 80 to 85% of their income comes from them doing direct door-to-door sales. And I know that because I was on a door-to-door sales. And when I say door-to-door, I mean literally knocking doors in a neighborhood, telling people about our service and our product. And out of those, you convert a certain amount of clients. Imagine a multi-billion-dollar company with 80 to 85% of their income coming from door-to-door sales. Now, if you break that down, how many people do you think wake up and think, I want an alarm system today. I want a camera here, camera there, this system sensor there. No one does. No one wakes up thinking I want it. So of these, maybe 15% will call up the company directly. Maybe they had a robbery, right? Or maybe someone in their neighborhood got a robbery happening, or maybe they moved into a new house and they're like, well, we want an alarm system here. So they take that initiative themselves. But these are the proactive people, okay? 15% of these people are proactive. There was a very common saying when I was working in this job, which is, when does everyone decide to buy an alarm system? Once their house has been broken into, right? So ideally, you want to have it in place before, so it never happens. You never have a break-in. So if you think about it, imagine if this company only focused on the 5% of people who thought they had a problem, who called in being proactive. Their revenue would decrease by 80 to 85%. They would not be a multi-billion-dollar company, okay? Now, how do we translate that into this process, the buyer's process, okay? If you are a coach right now and you're waiting for inbound leads to come to you ready to buy, they want to work with you, again, it's 1 to 5% of the population. What about all of these people here who maybe could benefit from your service, but they just don't know it? They just might not be educated, okay? And I'll give you a perfect example. And I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but once I needed some jeans, okay, because I've lost about 40 pounds last year because of COVID, and I was dieting and all of that. So I went to the mall to buy jeans, okay? I went there, there was a Levi's store. I was shopping around, and I noticed this gigantic line outside the Levi's store, but not for the store, but for the store next to it. And it was the Apple store, okay? I didn't go in looking for an iPhone or anything like that. I just saw, holy crap, what's this whole line all about? What's going on? So I went, looked around, looked at some of the pamphlets, asked some folks what's going on. Turned out some new MacBook had came around and it was selling like hotcakes and everyone wanted it. I went into the store, checked it out, and I liked it a lot, so I bought it. So then I came back and I was thinking, well, I went out to get a pair of jeans and I came back with a MacBook Pro. So you see what happened there. I wasn't even aware that I wanted it until it was there in front of me, until I saw how it could solve a problem for me. Because if you saw my current laptop, it's like huge, gigantic, right? So when the opportunity presents itself to you, then you start thinking, do I need this? Maybe I do need this. Maybe this can solve a problem for me, okay? Which is why so much of your time should be spent here and not just waiting for people to fall in your lap and just beg you for your service, because that's not going to happen very, very often, okay? So how do you get from, now we've decided how we should not just focus on this part, how do you get someone from this point to this point, okay? How do you get them from I'm not interested to yes, I've decided to work with you? I want to share a concept from a book called Gap Selling by Keenan. So he talks about you are taking your clients, your ideal clients, on a journey between where they are now and where they want to go. And the area in between that is a gap, hence the title of the book. So this is what it looks like, okay? Let's just this looks like a piece of art, doesn't it? I might have a career in art in the future. Let me know if you want to buy this. It's open for auction. It's like $250, okay? Let me know if anyone wants one of these. This is your current state, or rather, your client's current state. And I'll talk about specifically what that is. And then you have their future state. Okay? Now, between these, you have a gap. This gap right here, man, look how colorful this is. I love it. This is where you build value with your clients, all right? This is where they are now, okay? So we can say maybe there's a certain problem they're having, and this is the solution that they want. And this right here is your service, your program, your course, whatever it is, that bridges the gap. Okay. Again, hence the gap selling model. So your clients, their current state, it might be a place where they have a certain amount of pain. So for example, I usually give career coaching examples because it's something that I've done quite a bit in the past. Someone's looking for a job and they don't have a job. That's their current state. They're unemployed. Maybe they have a job. They're not making the kind of money they want to make. That's the current state. Dissatisfied with their job, dissatisfied with the career they're in. Maybe they think their skill sets deserves a much higher pay. That is their current state, okay? A very good salesperson will take so much time to understand this part here. Where are you now? What's the problem? Why do we need to change? Why not just stay here, right? So for example, if you're talking to someone and they're like, well, I have this job right now, I'm making $40,000, $50,000, or maybe I'm making $100,000, then you can ask them, listen, you're making $100,000 right now. It seems like things are going pretty well. What seems to be the problem? So you're challenging their current situation. You're not telling them, what, you're making $100,000? Well, you could be making $150,000. You could be making $500,000. It's not my job to tell them what they want. I'm just going to ask them, listen, like what you're telling me, it sounds pretty good. So what seems to be the challenge? So think about it kind of like a doctor, right? When you go to the doctor's office, will the doctor ever say, hey, your knee hurts, right? It must hurt quite a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this medication, this surgery, that surgery, blah, blah, and this will fix your problem. Or maybe it's not a big enough problem. Maybe the knee pain doesn't really bother them. So it's not the doctor's job to pitch them on a medication. The job is just to ask enough questions to see if it's a big enough problem for us to work on together. So I do the same thing, okay? With their current state, you want to be as specific as possible, okay? So where are you now? What's going well? What's well? What's not well? And any opportunities that can come in between. So maybe they say, well, you know what, I'm pretty happy with my job, not so happy with my boss. Maybe I'm pretty happy with my salary and my boss, but it's not something I want to do for the next 5 years, okay? Now, I like doing something called the 3 whys. This is something that I do very regularly in my own sales calls. This is why this. I hope you can see this. Why this? Why me? And why now? Okay? These are my favorite questions to ask. And the reason I ask these questions is because, first of all, my program is a pretty expensive program, right? So I want to make sure that they're ready to sign on. They're ready to hit the ground running, because if any of these things don't work out, then maybe it's not the right time, because I don't want anyone to pay me and then they're like, oh man, I shouldn't have bought your program, or maybe I should have bought it in 10 years or whatever. So why this is, why do we need to fix this? If you have $100,000 job, why do we need to change that? It sounds pretty good to me. Get them to tell you. So maybe, for example, you're a fitness coach, right? And so what is it that you want to change about your current physique? Why not just do nothing? Why not continue what we're doing now? Well, maybe they'll say, well, I want to get a 6-pack. I want to, I don't know, lose weight, whatever it might be. Now you have some reasons because you're understanding their current state. Why me? I'm wondering why you didn't just buy a course or pick up a book or watch all these free YouTube videos. How come you need a coach? Or why are you looking into talking to other people? So again, let them tell you why they need it, okay? And why now? Is this urgent enough? Why can't we do this 3 months from now, 6 months from now? When you ask these questions, you're being very, very specific. The analogy I like to go into it is you're almost convincing them out of it, okay? It's kind of like a doctor and surgery. They're not going to recommend surgery unless they know you need the surgery, right? You're not going to walk in with a headache and like, hey, yeah, you need surgery. Let's go do some brain surgery. They're not going to do that. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. Wait. Do you really need surgery? Maybe you can just fix this with a pill. Maybe you can just do that. I've had so many people get on a call with me and say, Yasir, I want to work with you, blah, 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 blah. And I'll ask them these questions. Why this? Why me? Why now? And turns out they're making like $200,000. And I'm like, listen, why do we need to do this? It sounds like you're doing pretty well. If you're making, and I'll give you a specific example. One of the clients that I was working with, she was working 80 hours a week between her job and her full-time business, right? So I said, listen, why do you want to work with me? If you work with me, you're going to have even more work on top of that. You're going to be burnt out. I don't think this is a good idea at all. I actually try to push them away because I know if they join my program, it's not going to be a good fit. So people respect that honesty. They will respect it because they know you're not just trying to sell them something. Had I wanted to sell them something, I'd be like, well, this person's already spending $80 to $100 a week. I'll just sell them in a course. They'll completely forget about it. I'll make a couple of bucks. But that's just not the kind of business person I am. Okay. So why this? Why me? Why now? Once they pass through these, once I know there's a problem, once I know their current state, it has some sort of a lacking, then we start establishing what the future state is. Okay. So right now, I'm not making enough money. I'm not happy with my job. I'm not doing what I really love doing. Fantastic. I understand. Where do you want to go? What does the future state look like? Well, I want to get a 50% raise in my salary. All right. I want to get a boss who, I don't know, gives me more challenges. I want a job where I can use my PMP certifications, whatever it might be. So now you know very clearly this is where they are. This is where they want to go. Okay. Maybe they're at a salary right now of, man, I'm loving the colors here. Okay. If anyone wants to buy this, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to frame this and put it on my wall. I think it looks lovely. Let's suppose they're making 100K. Okay. And they want to get to a point where they want to make 200K. Okay. What's the math on that? The math is 100K gap. All right. So for each one of these things, you understand where they are now, where they want to go, what is the gap. So what kind of boss do they have right now? What kind of boss do they want? What kind of company do they work in now? What kind of company do they want to go for? And you will lengthen this gap. Okay. Now, for example, if they came to me right now and they said, hey, Yasir, I want a resume. And I said, okay, great. I'll make you a resume. Perfect. What does that diagram look like? This is their current state. This is their future state, right? This is the gap and it's filled by the resume. Done deal. But you see how that gap is so small, right? I'm almost like an order taker where they'll give me an order and I'll fulfill that order. I'm not an expert. An expert will consult them and ask them smart questions, right? So instead, if they came to me and said, hey, I want a resume, I wouldn't just say, hey, okay, for a resume, I charge $400. I'd say, okay, let me understand why you want a resume. So maybe they'll say, well, I want a resume because currently I'm looking for a job, okay? Okay, perfect. Got it. So why do you think your resume is a problem? Well, because I've applied to 100 different places with my resume and I've only gotten 2 responses. Let's say this is the conversation. Okay, have you tried anything else? And they say no. All right. So maybe the resume isn't the problem. Maybe the real problem is a job searching strategy, right? So you see how all of a sudden we start here with a resume, but now that we've asked smart questions about their situation, it becomes a much bigger problem. It becomes a job searching problem, right? So instead of selling $100 service, you're selling a $2,000 job searching program. Can you see how taking the time to understand their current situation and their future situation and the gap that they're facing will increase the value that you can provide? And that's what you're trying to do with a service provider. You want to provide them with as much value as possible with your service, because if it doesn't solve a big enough problem, then you can't really charge that much money, right? There's only so much you can charge for, let's say, a fitness program or a PDF file or maybe a 1-hour coaching session. There's only so much you can charge. The bigger the problem is, the more you can charge, the more value you can give. So going back to this chart here, what your job is to help them realize if their current situation and future situation has a big enough gap. So for example, if you talk to them right now and they say, I want to get a 6-pack, right? And they know in order to get a 6-pack, they need to lose 50 pounds. So that's a pretty big gap that they need to fix, right? If you ask them questions about why do you need to do this now? Why do you need to do this at all? Why do you need a coach's help? Why do you need my help? And they tell you, well, I've been dissatisfied with my health and my physique lately, or I want to get more fit. I want to prepare for a triathlon. Now they're telling you, and they're moving down here. They're moving from no interest to initial interest. They're being educated on their problem. And through this process, you will lead them from 0 to here. And notice, there is no pitching anywhere here. I'm not telling them about my service, nothing whatsoever. All I do, I ask them enough questions to get them to tell me if there is a problem. Then I ask them further questions about how big the problem is. If the problem isn't big, then I won't tell them anything, right? So for example, if I said, you're making $100,000 right now, why change anything? Why not just stay here? And they say, yeah, no, I'm perfectly happy. Okay, perfect. Then I'm wondering why we're on the call. So they'll say, okay, well, yeah, actually, it's not just the money. I'm also thinking about my satisfaction. I don't want to do this long term. So you ask these questions to probe deeper and deeper and deeper. A lot of people don't know the extent of the pain they're in, okay? So for example, in the book, it's right here. It's called Gap Selling, if you want to look it up. It gives a fantastic example of, let's say, someone there's a patient, right? And the patient has a headache. They walk into the doctor's office and they say, hey, I've got a headache, give me some pills, I'll be good to go. If the doctor were just to give them the pills and go home, the doctor is letting the patient diagnose themselves. Is that what a good doctor should do? Letting the patient diagnose themselves? Or should the doctor diagnose them? Obviously, the doctor should ask smart questions. Wait, before I give you these pills, what kind of headache are you having? Have you had enough water? Have you slept all right? Have you had anything to eat? Have you been drinking a lot? Whatever, ask all these questions. Maybe it's not just a headache, okay? So let me give you another example. Let's just take the headache example. So we got a headache, all right? And the solution in the client's mind is a $5 pill. Okay, I'm going to take this pill. It's going to solve my headache. All right. If this transaction took place, right, it wouldn't solve a big problem. It would solve a very small problem. But suppose the doctor took the time and said, okay, you're having a headache. How long have you had this headache for? Well, I've had this headache for 4 weeks. Okay, 4 weeks. That sounds like a lot. Have you had any other side effects? Well, yeah, you know what? I'm really fatigued, or I don't feel energetic, or I'm having depressive episodes, whatever it might be, right? And then the doctor's like, okay, well, why don't we do an MRI? Why don't we look into this further? They do an MRI. Maybe they discover there's a tumor in his head or something like that. And now they say, well, to get this tumor out is going to be a $50,000 surgery, right? Now, the doctor's not going to say, trust me, you need this right now. We should do this right away. They'll say, listen, I know it's expensive, but we have to do this. Would you like to do it? Is this something you can afford? Ultimately, we can't force them to do it, right? If they don't want to do it, they won't do it. But can you see how the bigger the problem gets, the more urgency is built? If there isn't a problem there, you can't convince someone to buy. Because if you're convincing someone, you're trying to manipulate them by trying to get them on your side. If there isn't a problem, there's nothing to solve. But what you have to do as a salesperson is to ask enough questions to help them understand what is the gap between where they are now and where they want to go. And if there's a big enough gap, there's a big enough gap in terms of how much time they'll save, how much money they'll make, or how much money they'll save, how much energy they will save, how much better they will feel mentally. If you can show them that their future state is better than their current state, then there exists a gap between where they want to go and where they are now. And if there is a gap, guess what? There is room for your service, there is room for your program, there is room for your course, okay? So I hope I didn't confuse you too much with all these diagrams, but essentially what I'm trying to say is you don't need to convince people to buy your service. You will build trust and value with people by asking them smart questions, asking them questions about their situation, what's going on, is it a big enough problem? Help them show you that it's a big enough problem. Once it is, then they'll understand, wow, this person is asking me so many intelligent questions, getting me to really think about my problem, getting me to think about things that I didn't think about before. If you can make them feel like you understand their problem, they will trust that you have the solution. Okay. My entire sales philosophy is that one line. If they can trust you understand their problem, then they will trust you have the solution. Okay. This is why I don't believe in sales pitches. I don't believe in sales scripts. I don't believe in pre-written lines where you're just going question by question, next question, next question. The whole reason I made my entire course was because I was dissatisfied with the kind of sales tips I was being given. I was being given a giant sales script. Ask this question, ask that question, and ask weird questions like, hey, if you don't fix this problem now, how is this going to emotionally like all these weird tactical questions. I didn't really like them at all. So I created my entire system myself. Okay. If you want to check more about that, you can find all of the links in my YouTube comments. There's tons of information about that. But I hope this helped out. If it did, let me know. This is something I'm honestly just super, super passionate about. And I'm hoping through this group, whatever questions you have about sales, about lead generation, I could make more live streams like this. So we'll do another live stream on Thursday. We'll talk about how to discuss pricing, especially if you found this useful, let me know. And then I will see you on Thursday. Have a good evening, everybody.